A glowing MRI scan on a cold monitor. The hippocampus, the brain's memory center, isn't just shrinking. It looks chewed on, corroded. This belongs to a 62-year-old woman. For months, she couldn't remember her own daughter's phone number. She'd walk into her kitchen, open the fridge, and just stand there, staring at the shelves, completely blank. Her doctor looked at this exact scan and gave her the standard, devastating verdict: early-stage Alzheimer's. Get your affairs in order. But looking closer at the lipid density, that diagnosis was dead wrong. Her brain wasn't genetically failing. It was rusting, literally undergoing a process called lipid peroxidation. And the catalyst? It was sitting right there in her kitchen cabinet, in a clear plastic bottle used every single day to fry her morning eggs. Most people believe cognitive decline is a lottery. You get old, you roll the dice, and maybe you lose your mind. I used to accept that too, looking at standard medical textbooks. But when you actually crack open the biochemistry of the blood-brain barrier, a terrifying and liberating truth emerges. Memory loss isn't always a disease you catch. Often, it's an injury you inflict. An injury caused by starving your nervous system of a very specific, microscopic building block while drowning it in oxidized fat. And the most incredible part of this patient's medical record? 6 months after this scan, her memory came back. The brain fog evaporated. The structural degradation didn't just stop, it began to reverse. No experimental drugs, no million-dollar treatments. She simply stopped destroying her myelin sheaths with heated seed oils and introduced exactly 1 tablespoon of an incredibly cheap, raw seed into her morning routine. A seed that physically rebuilt the insulation around her neurons. Before I reveal exactly what she ate, we have to look at the crime scene. We have to understand how a memory actually dies. Think of your brain not as a computer, but as a vast, wet electrical grid. 86 billion neurons, firing signals at up to 268 miles per hour. For that electricity to travel cleanly from one cell to another without short-circuiting, every single wire, your axons, needs insulation. That insulation is the myelin sheath. It is pure fat. In fact, your entire brain is nearly 60% fat. Now, what happens when you spend 40 years building that insulation out of cheap, heavily processed cooking oils? Canola, soybean, sunflower oils heated to smoke points. You aren't just eating calories, you are absorbing oxidized linoleic acid. I want you to visualize this. When you heat these oils in a pan, they break down into toxic byproducts like aldehydes. You ingest them, they enter your bloodstream. Usually, your blood-brain barrier acts like a nightclub bouncer, keeping toxins out of your central nervous system. But oxidized fats are insidious. They slip past the barrier because your brain desperately needs fat to survive, so it opens the door. Once inside, these unstable molecules do what free radicals do best. They steal. They rip electrons right out of your myelin sheaths. It is like pouring battery acid on a rubber wire. Microscopic holes appear in the insulation. This is the exact moment you walk into a room and forget why you are there. It's not a senior moment. It is a literal short circuit. The electrical signal carrying the thought, "I need to grab the keys," leaks out through the holes in your degraded myelin before it can reach the frontal lobe. The signal dies in the dark. Imagine the sheer panic of looking at a familiar face and drawing a blank. The cognitive stutter. It feels like a thick, heavy blanket has been thrown over your thoughts. You reach for a word. It's right there on the tip of your tongue. But the physical bridge to get there has collapsed. This collapse is microscopic, but its consequences are life-altering. Let's zoom into the actual structure of a neuron. A single neuron has a long tail called an axon. Wrapped tightly around this tail are cells called Schwann cells, forming the myelin sheath. Under an electron microscope, healthy myelin looks like a tight, smooth, glossy roll of tape. It's beautiful in its precision. But when we look at the autopsy samples of brains ravaged by dietary lipid peroxidation, the myelin doesn't look like tape. It looks like frayed, rotted rope. You see, the human body is brilliant, but it is bound by the laws of physics and chemistry. It cannot create omega-3 fatty acids out of thin air. It cannot synthesize docosahexaenoic acid, or DHO. which makes up a massive portion of healthy brain tissue. It completely relies on you to swallow these molecules. If you don't eat them, the brain panics. It has to keep rebuilding its structures every single day, so it grabs whatever is floating in your bloodstream. If all you give it is the oxidized, degraded fat from a fast food deep fryer or a cheap bottle of cooking oil, it builds your brain out of garbage. It is exactly like trying to patch a leaking submarine with wet cardboard. It will hold for a little while, but eventually the pressure wins. The water rushes in. In the brain, that water is oxidative stress. The medical establishment has spent billions of dollars trying to invent a pill to scrape away the amyloid plaques that form after this damage occurs. They treat the smoke, not the fire. They look at the symptoms, the plaques, the tangles, and declare war on them. But the plaques are just scar tissue. They are the brain's desperate attempt to bandage a bleeding wound. Why is the wound bleeding in the first place? Because the structural integrity of the cell membranes has been compromised by a severe, decades-long nutritional deficiency disguised as a modern, convenient diet. Day after day, your brain tries to repair the damage. It sends out inflammatory signals, summoning glial cells to clean up the mess. But this creates chronic neuroinflammation. The inflammation causes tissue swelling inside the rigid box of your skull. Your glymphatic system, the brain's overnight cleaning crew, gets choked off. Amyloid plaques begin to accumulate in the stagnant fluid. We blame aging. We blame bad luck. But if you look at the raw cellular mechanics, we are systematically dismantling our own neural networks with every fried meal, while simultaneously withholding the exact raw materials the brain desperately needs to patch the holes. Look closely at what happens when you sleep. Deep inside your skull, the brain shrinks slightly. It is a mechanical action. Cerebrospinal fluid rushes in, washing over the neurons, flushing out the metabolic ash left behind by a day of thinking. This is the glymphatic system in motion. But in a brain suffering from chronic lipid peroxidation, this fluid is thick. It is sluggish. The pathways are choked with inflammatory cytokines. The garbage doesn't leave. It settles. Her neurologist told her to do crossword puzzles. To stay active, it is almost insulting when you understand the biology. You cannot solve a crossword puzzle to rebuild a shattered lipid bilayer. You need raw materials. You need a very specific biochemical intervention to stop the oxidation and patch the microscopic holes in the myelin. This is where the medical record pivots from tragedy to a masterclass in cellular regeneration. We took her off the synthetic oils. Every drop of canola, sunflower, and soybean oil was purged from her kitchen. The aggressive source of free radicals was cut off, but stopping the bleeding isn't the same as healing the wound. The brain was still starving for the exact molecular structure it needed to repair the Schwann cells. Enter alpha-linolenic acid, or ALA. ALA is an essential omega-3 fatty acid. Essential is not a marketing term. In biochemistry, it means your body lacks the enzymatic machinery to create it. If you do not swallow it, you do not have it. Period. It is a fragile, highly reactive molecule. And it is the exact mortar the brain requires to reconstruct damaged myelin. But here is the critical failure point for most people trying to fix their cognitive health. They buy expensive fish oil capsules that have been sitting on a warehouse shelf for 8 months, turning rancid, fully oxidized before they even hit the stomach. They are swallowing the very problem they are trying to cure. For this patient, we used a delivery mechanism so rudimentary, so cheap, it is completely ignored by the pharmaceutical industry. Linum usitatissimum, the common flaxseed, but not just a handful of seeds. Whole flax seeds will pass completely through your digestive tract unbroken. Their outer shell is pure, indigestible cellulose. To access the biological gold mine inside, the seed must be pulverized. 1 tablespoon of raw, freshly ground flaxseed contains roughly 1,600 milligrams of pure, unoxidized alpha-linolenic acid, alongside a dense matrix of lignans, powerful antioxidant polyphenols. Let's track exactly what happened when she ingested that powder every morning. The ground seed enters the highly acidic environment of the stomach. The ALA is liberated from the plant fiber. It moves into the small intestine, crosses the epithelial barrier, and enters the bloodstream. Unlike the heavy oxidized fats from fried foods, ALA is structurally fluid. It is flexible. When it reaches the blood-brain barrier, it is recognized immediately as a critical asset. It is pulled across. Once inside the central nervous system, the real work begins. The ALA molecules act like microscopic sponges, neutralizing the free radicals that have been tearing through the tissue. The lignins suppress the inflammatory signals. The swelling inside the skull subtly decreases. The glymphatic system, previously choked, begins to flow freely again, washing away the stagnant amyloid proteins. And then the myelin sheath rebuilds. The Schwann cells, finally receiving their required fuel, begin to spin new layers of fat around the damaged axons. They patch the holes. The rubber insulation on the wire is restored. You can actually feel this happening. The patient described it not as a sudden burst of energy, but as a lifting of a heavy atmospheric pressure. The sensation of walking through deep water disappeared. By month 3, the cognitive stutter faded. She stopped pausing mid-sentence to search for a word. The electrical signals were no longer leaking into the void. They were hitting their targets cleanly, at hundreds of miles per hour. She remembered the phone number. She walked into the kitchen and knew exactly why she was there. The synaptic plasticity, the brain's ability to form new connections, was back online. All because she stopped burning her neural pathways with degraded cooking oils and provided the exact, precise dosage of a raw material required for biological repair. But there is a catch. Biology is unforgiving. You cannot cook the flaxseed. You cannot bake it into a muffin or fry it in a pancake. Heat destroys the double bonds in the ALA molecule instantly. It oxidizes it. If you heat it, you have just created the exact poison you are trying to avoid. It must be raw. It must be ground immediately before consumption, or kept in a dark, freezing environment to prevent the oxygen in the air from degrading it. 1 precise tablespoon, raw, mixed into cold yogurt, or sprinkled over a salad, every single day. This isn't a temporary cleanse. This is a permanent structural requirement for a human brain operating in a modern, highly oxidative environment. Your neurons are constantly turning over. The myelin is constantly degrading and needing repair. The moment you stop providing the raw materials, the moment you return to the convenience of the deep fryer, the holes begin to form again. The electricity starts leaking. The memories start slipping through the cracks. Look down at your plate right now. The fork in your hand is more powerful than a surgeon's scalpel. It is making a physical choice about the architecture of your nervous system. You are either insulating your memories or you are burning them away. The choice is biological. The consequences are permanent. Stop waiting for a miracle pill. Throw out the toxic oils. Grind the seed. Protect your wiring. If you want to keep discovering the unapologetic truth about what you are feeding your body, subscribe to the Eterno channel. We don't do fluff. We do biology. Leave a comment below with the one oil you are throwing in the trash today, and I will see you in the next analysis. Let's talk about the supplement industry's favorite lie. You see the commercials everywhere. Glowing CGI brains, promises of instant cognitive clarity from a single translucent golden capsule of fish oil. The 62-year-old patient I mentioned earlier, she was taking 3 of those expensive capsules a day when her hippocampus was actively shrinking. Why didn't they save her? Here is the uncomfortable billion-dollar truth about extracted oils. Omega-3 fatty acids, whether they are EPA, DHA, or ALA, are highly polyunsaturated. In the realm of chemistry, that means their molecular bonds are incredibly unstable. They crave oxygen. The exact moment you extract them from their natural, protective biological matrix, whether that is the tissue of a wild-caught salmon or the hull of a seed, they begin to oxidize. By the time that premium golden capsule sits in a hot delivery truck, waits in a brightly lit warehouse for 6 months, and finally sits on your bathroom counter, a massive percentage of the oil inside has already turned rancid. You are not swallowing a cognitive cure. You are swallowing a highly concentrated payload of free radicals. When you take oxidized fish oil, you are actively contributing to the exact neuroinflammation you are desperately trying to treat. The medical term for this is exacerbating oxidative stress through lipid peroxides. This is exactly why the raw, whole flaxseed is an unparalleled biological masterpiece. The alpha-linolenic acid inside a flaxseed isn't floating naked and vulnerable. It is locked tightly inside a dense matrix of lignans. Lignans are a type of phytoestrogen, but more importantly for your brain, they are fiercely protective, relentless antioxidants. They act as molecular bodyguards. They physically prevent the ALA from oxidizing until the exact moment your stomach acid breaks down the cell walls of the freshly ground seed. The delivery system is flawless. Nature engineered it perfectly. We simply forgot how to utilize it. But let me be very clear about the timeline of this healing process. Biology does not care about your modern impatience. You cannot undo 40 years of deep frying your neural networks in a single weekend. When you start this protocol, the first thing that happens isn't a miraculous return of your childhood memories. The first thing that happens is a cessation of hostilities. The daily barrage of oxidized linoleic acid from your cooking oil stops. The brain's immune system, the microglial cells, finally stops sounding the emergency alarm. Let's dive deeper into what that brain fog actually is on a physical level. It is not just a feeling of being tired. It is a severe state of astrogliosis. Astrocytes are star-shaped glial cells that act as the caretakers of your neurons. When oxidized fats breach the blood-brain barrier, these astrocytes change shape. They become reactive and aggressive. They stop feeding the neurons and instead start forming dense scar tissue to isolate the damage. This microscopic scar tissue physically blocks the synaptic cleft. When you try to remember a name, the electrical thought impulse hits this astrocytic scar and violently scatters. That is the fog. It is a physical barricade made of cellular debris. By week 2 of the raw ALA protocol, the level of inflammatory cytokines in your cerebrospinal fluid begins to drop significantly. The astrocytic scarring pauses. The pressure inside your skull subtly normalizes. Many patients report that this is exactly when their sleep architecture fundamentally changes. They start hitting deep, restorative REM sleep cycles again. Why? Because the glymphatic system is no longer choked by widespread inflammation. It can actually flush the metabolic ash out of the brain overnight. By month 2, the actual physical reconstruction of the myelin sheath accelerates. The Schwann cells are actively pulling the ALA you consumed that morning, converting the necessary amounts and meticulously weaving it into the damaged axons. The electrical leaks stop. The insulation is restored. This is the exact moment the fog lifts. The forgotten words return to your tongue. The heavy, sluggish feeling in your prefrontal cortex vanishes. But there is a fatal, irreversible mistake people make right at this critical juncture. They start feeling better, their memory sharpens, their focus returns, and they celebrate by going to a restaurant and ordering a plate of heavily fried food. Understand the cellular catastrophe that happens in that moment. You just introduced a massive wave of oxidized, degraded toxic lipids back into a delicate, newly healing ecosystem. It is the biological equivalent of throwing a lit match into a room entirely filled with gasoline vapors. The neuroinflammation spikes immediately. That delicate, thin layer of new myelin you just spent 60 meticulously disciplined days building, it gets instantly scorched. Furthermore, we must talk about the ultimate amplifier of this destruction, refined sugar. What happens when you combine oxidized cooking oils with a high-sugar diet? You create advanced glycation end products, appropriately abbreviated as AGEs. Sugar molecules physically bind to the already damaged, frayed myelin proteins, crystallizing them. The fat becomes brittle. Instead of just leaking electrical signals, the neuron actually snaps. This results in irreversible cell death. You cannot sprinkle flaxseed on a glazed donut and expect your hippocampus to heal. This is the harsh reality of the human body. It is a constantly adapting, ruthlessly efficient machine. It uses exactly what you give it. Nothing more, nothing less. If you want to protect your memories, the faces of your children, the specific sound of your favorite song, the vast library of knowledge you have accumulated over a lifetime, you have to aggressively defend your blood-brain barrier. You must become the gatekeeper of your own skull. Here is your exact, non-negotiable protocol. Write this down. Step 1. Go to your kitchen right now. Open your pantry. Look at your cooking oils. If you see a bottle of canola oil, soybean oil, corn oil, sunflower oil, or anything vaguely labeled vegetable oil, throw it in the trash. Right now, do not finish the bottle because you paid for it. Do not give it away to a neighbor. Treat it exactly like the slow-acting neurotoxin that it is. Replace it immediately with pure, cold-pressed extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, or grass-fed butter for cooking. These are structurally stable fats. Their carbon bonds are tightly packed. They do not shatter into toxic, brain-damaging aldehydes when exposed to heat. They respect the biological boundaries of your cells. Step 2. Buy whole organic brown flax seeds. Do not buy them pre-ground. I repeat, do not buy pre-ground flaxseed meal. Pre-ground flaxseed oxidizes rapidly the moment it is exposed to the air in the processing facility. By the time you buy it, the ALA is already severely degraded. You want the whole intact seed. The hull is the vault. Step 3. Purchase a small, inexpensive coffee grinder. Do not use it for coffee. This is now your dedicated medical device. Every single morning, without fail, put exactly 1 tablespoon of the whole flax seeds into the grinder. Grind them to a fine, oily powder. Step 4. Consume it immediately. You have a window of roughly 5 to 10 minutes before the oxygen in the air begins to degrade the newly exposed ALA. Do not cook it. Do not bake it into muffins or bread. Heat destroys the delicate double bonds of the ALA molecule instantly. Sprinkle the raw powder over cold Greek yogurt. Stir it into a bowl of oatmeal only after the oatmeal has completely cooled down to room temperature. Or, if you want the most direct route, simply mix it into a small glass of cold water and drink it quickly. Wash it down. Let the gastric juices do the extraction work in the dark, oxygen-free environment of your stomach. Step 5. Do this every single day for the rest of your life. It sounds dramatic, doesn't it? The rest of your life. But consider the horrific alternative. Consider the slow, terrifying, humiliating erasure of your own identity. The human brain is arguably the most complex and magnificent structure in the known universe. Yet its basic structural maintenance is surprisingly primitive. It requires clean fat. It requires continuous, unoxidized insulation. The modern medical industry desperately wants you to believe that cognitive decline is a complex, unsolvable mystery that can only be managed with expensive, patented pharmaceutical molecules. They want you perpetually waiting for a magical cure that is always just 10 years away. But the cure for dietary lipid peroxidation isn't a mystery at all. It is a biological certainty proven in the very structure of our cells. Stop providing the poison. Start providing the mortar. The fork in your hand is the most powerful surgical instrument you possess to dictate exactly how your brain ages. You are making a physical, structural choice about your neurology at every single meal. Your memories are yours to keep, but you have to build the biochemical fortress to protect them. If you found this clinical analysis illuminating, do not just casually scroll past. Hit the subscribe button. Join the Eterno channel. We are systematically dismantling the lies of the modern processed food industry, one biological mechanism at a time. Share this video with someone who is starting to forget. You might just save their mind. I will see you in the next breakdown.